you will never look at the world the same way again. A rebellion that wasn't led by demons, but by celestial guardians. Today, you will meet the Watchers, the angels who loved, who taught, who corrupted, and who paid an eternal price for breaking God's own law. Get ready, because this is not just an old story, it's an echo from the past that still resonates in the present. What if I told you that the angels who were supposed to protect humanity ended up becoming its worst threat? Did they teach magic, weapons, spells, and cosmic secrets forbidden to mankind? What if I told you that your choices nearly destroyed the world, and that God had to personally intervene to prevent creation from being erased? Today you will understand why the Watchers were condemned, what they did to the daughters of men, how the Nephilim giants were born, and in the end, I'll show you. The shocking prophesiage says that they can return. Stay until the end. Before we dive into this revealing journey, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, because here, we uncover hidden, forbidden, and mysterious biblical stories, those that few people know, but that completely change our spiritual perspective. Now, take a deep breath. The story of the Watchers is about to begin. From the beginning of time, when the universe still shone with the purity of newborn creation, God established perfect celestial hierarchies. Angels, cherubim, seraphim, archangels, each with their function, each with their mission. Among these categories, there existed a special order, the order of ... Watchers, or vigilantes. They were not warriors, like Michael. They were not messengers, like Gabriel. And they weren't curators, like Raphael. The Watchers were observers. His mission was to accompany humanity, witness its growth, observe the development of the first civilizations, and ensure that the divine plan followed its natural course without direct interference. But there was a problem. Us Watchers, they loved to notice. They saw everything: love, suffering, joy, pain, the evolution of humankind. They were fascinated by human freedom, something that angels did not possess in the same way. While humans made mistakes, learned, fell, got up, loved, and forgave, the angels watched with a mixture of curiosity and admiration that grew with each generation. Until one day, something changed. Among all the Watchers, there was one leader. Semjazahi was respected, admired, and considered the wisest of the order. But Semyaza harbored within himself a profound, almost dangerous curiosity. He did not merely observe humanity, he studied it, contemplated it, questioned it. He wanted to understand her, and that's how, slowly, something began to stir within the angel's heart. The Book of Enoch states that the Watchers descended to Mount Hermon during a time when humanity was expanding. Tribes were growing, villages were becoming towns, families were multiplying, and it was there, in that vibrant scene of life, that the Watchers witnessed something that would change history forever: the beauty of men's daughters. The ancient text says they were beautiful, but that word doesn't do justice to the intensity of the experience. For celestial beings who had never experienced physical attraction, much less emotional attraction, seeing human women so intense, so alive, so full of feeling, provoked an unimaginable reaction. For the first time in the history of heaven, angels felt desire, a forbidden, dangerous, uncontrollable desire. Semyaza was the first to recognize what was happening. He saw that the Watchers were falling in love with the women, and that this could lead to everyone's downfall. So, he summoned the 200 angels to the top of Mount Hermon. The scene was magnificent. Golden clouds reflected the light of the setting sun, while a gentle breeze cut through the air. There, Semyaza declared something that echoed like thunder: "I will go down and take a wife from among the humans. But I fear that if I do this alone, you will abandon me. So swear with me, swear that you will all do the same." The Watchers exchanged glances. They knew this was forbidden. They knew there was an eternal, cosmic law that forbade union between celestial beings and humans. But desire had already taken hold of them. Curiosity had already crossed the line into the impossible, and the forbidden love seemed irresistible. So, the 200 Watchers swore an oath, a pact that neither of them could break, a pact that would seal their fate forever. That night, stars streaked across the Mesopotamian sky. The Watchers descended from the firmament like living lights. They assumed human forms, tall, strong, of immeasurable beauty. They walked among the villages, and they chose women for themselves. Some women were frightened, others felt afraid, but many were fascinated by the celestial presence. And so began the forbidden union between angels and humans, and from her would be born the most feared creatures of antiquity, the Nephilim, giants, hybrids, monsters. The Bible describes them as mighty men of renown. But apocryphal texts reveal something far more sinister. They were beings of superhuman strength, insatiable, violent, and uncontrolled. Feared by human tribes, they swept through entire villages, devoured crops, stole livestock, and destroyed settlements. And when there wasn't enough food anymore, they resorted to devouring people. Meanwhile, the Watchers themselves began to corrupt humanity with forbidden knowledge. Azazel taught the arts of war. Semyaza taught incantations. Cable teacher astrology. Penemu taught writing and manipulation. Kazdia taught abortions and poisons. Humanity, still fragile, has received too much knowledge, too quickly, and the earth plunged into chaos. God saw everything, and his patience ran out. The archangels were sent. The sentence has been handed down. The Watchers would be punished. The Nephilim would be destroyed, and the ancient world would be wiped out by the greatest catastrophe in history, the flood. Corruption on earth had reached such a deep level that even the Watchers themselves began to realize the gravity of what they had unleashed. Their children, the Nephilim, had become uncontrollable monsters. Like trees that grow crooked from the root, nothing could straighten them. They were the offspring of a forbidden union, beings whose very existence created imbalance in creation. The Watchers, who once walked among humans with pride, now silently observed the trail of destruction left by the creatures they had spawned. Burned villages, devastated settlements, creatures that screamed through the night, demanding sacrifices, demanding food, demanding blood. The cries of the innocent rose to the heavens, and like smoke rising before the throne, they came before God. Upon seeing the state of creation, the Creator made a decision that echoed throughout eternity. My spirit will not contend with man forever. The earth would be purified, not by fire, not through war, but through the water, by the force of the waters that would erase the corrupt world and give humanity a second chance. But before the judgment took place, God sent specific orders to the 4 great archangels. Miguel, he would have to deal with Semyaza and the Watchers. Raphael, he would be given the mission to arrest Azazel. Gabriel, he would face the Nephilim. Uriel, he would warn Noah about what was to come. Each archangel carried within him an expression of divine justice, and none of them would hesitate to fulfill the celestial decree. Azazel was the Watcher who taught humans the art of war, metallurgy, sharp blades, and armor that transformed simple men into assassins. He taught them cosmetics that seduced, poisons that killed, and corruptions that spread like invisible diseases. Therefore, his punishment was exemplary. Raphael descended from the heavens in a blazing light, like a living flame that cut through the firmament. He found Azazel in a desert region, where the Watcher observed the destruction caused by the giants, with a mixture of pride and fear. Azazel, said Raphael, his voice echoing like distant thunder, your sins will no longer be tolerated. Azazel tried to justify himself, tried to argue, tried to blame Semyaza and the other Watchers. But the time for explanations was over. Raphael enveloped him in chains of fire. The chains fastened themselves to the fallen angel's arms and legs, like luminous serpents. Azazel screamed, not from physical pain, for angels are resilient beyond human comprehension, but from shame, from terror, from a premonition of what was to come. He was dragged into a deep crevice, a dark abyss beneath the sharp rocks. There he would be thrown. There he would remain until Judgment Day. There was no light. There was no way out. Only silence and eternal darkness. The order was carried out. Meanwhile, Miguel led the most complex mission, to arrest Semyaza and all the Watchers who had made the pact on Mount Hermon. Semyaza, unlike Azazel, did not flee. He knew that judgment was inevitable. He knew he had broken the most sacred law of the heavens. He knew his fate was sealed. But behind his tough exterior, there was immense sadness. He saw the chaos he had caused. He felt the weight of guilt. He understood that his choice had brought destruction to humanity. The Watchers were gathered, one by one, as Michael appeared before them with his flaming sword. The fallen angels tried to intercede, tried to ask for forgiveness, tried to plead for mercy. But Michael said nothing. He simply executed the divine order with absolute precision. Semyaza took a step forward. I take responsibility. If anyone should be punished above all others, it's me. Miguel did not respond. It wasn't necessary. The sentence had already been pronounced. Semyaza and the 200 Watchers were imprisoned in deep caverns, chained in darkness that would never know dawn. Their voices echoed through creation as laments, not for physical pain, but for the loss of heaven, for the loss of light, for the loss of grace. And there they would wait, for ages, until the great final judgment. With the Watchers imprisoned, one gigantic problem remained literal. The Nephilim continued to devastate the earth. They were immense, voracious, and violent. People hid in caves, fled to the mountains, and prayed that God would look upon them. Gabriel received the order to eliminate them all. Some ancient texts describe Gabriel leading a legion of warrior angels to confront the giants. The battle was brutal, intense, apocalyptic. Mountains trembled. The earth shook. The cries of the Nephilim could be heard for miles, and yet, none of that would be enough to erase them. The Nephilim were many, extremely strong, enormous, and they are becoming increasingly violent. Only one force could destroy them completely. Water. The water that would come from the sky. The water that would come from the earth. The water that would wash away everything that had been corrupted. While the Watcher's punishment was being carried out, Uriel was sent to deliver a message to a righteous man, Noah. Uriel appeared to Noah in a bright light, bringing detailed instructions for building the ark. The celestial warning was clear. The earth is corrupted. Humanity is lost. Giants consume everything. I will pour mighty waters upon the world. But you, Noah, will be spared. Noah, obedient, began building the ark. While he hammered wood and adjusted beams, the people mocked him. No one believed that something so terrible could happen. But Noah knew, and God knew, and the heavens were preparing themselves. When the ark was finished, Noah and his family went inside. Animals of all kinds were gathered. The sky darkened. The clouds grew thick. The winds changed. And then, it began. First, a light rain. Then, heavy drops. And then, a flood so intense that no one had ever seen anything like it. Water was falling from the sky like waterfalls. Water gushed from the earth like inverted rivers. The world roared. The world was crying. The world was erased. People ran to the mountains. The Nephilim screamed, tried to climb the rocks, but were swallowed by the waters. The entire earth was covered. The pre-flood world disappeared beneath tons of divine water, and when it finally all stopped, creation breathed again. When the giants died, their bodies vanished, but their spirits remained trapped on earth. They did not belong to heaven, for they were not fully angelic. They did not belong to earth, for they were not fully human. And so, they became wandering entities, spiritual shadows, wandering without rest. According to the Book of Enoch, these spirits became the demons. The spiritual torments of humanity began there, as a final echo of the Watchers' rebellion, when the waters finally receded, revealing transformed mountains, valleys, and lands. The earth seemed silent as if it had fainted after a scream that lasted too long. The ark rested. Life began again. Creation breathed. But one crucial detail remained. The spirits of the Nephilim were not destroyed. They continued wandering the world, unable to return to heaven, unable to fully integrate into the divine plan. They were spiritual hybrids, and their physical death did not seal their end. On the contrary, it released their essences into an even darker destiny. These spirits became evil influences, mind-boggling, invisible manipulators of the human heart, entities that wish to possess mortal bodies in order to feel again what they have lost. Thus was born the oldest concept of spiritual evil, demons. Unlike the fallen angels, unlike Satan, unlike the Watchers themselves, they were remnants, shadows, distorted echoes of the original sin committed on Mount Hermon. Post-Diluvian humanity was still unaware of this truth. It did not know that invisible spiritual beings were observing every step, every decision, every temptation. It did not know that the fall of the Watchers had left a permanent scar on the spiritual history of the world. But God knew, and the angels knew, and that is why, after the flood, contact between heaven and earth became much more conservative, much more distant. God had already seen what happened when celestial beings approached humanity too closely. The spiritual order of the universe needed to be rigorously maintained. But, ironically, divine silence itself ended up creating a new sensation among men, curiosity about the forbidden. And the spirits of the Nephilim took advantage of this. They whispered temptations. They influenced wars. Uncontrolled desires were ignited. They manipulated dreams. They appeared as shadows during the night. They weren't as strong as their former gigantic bodies, but they were persistent, subtly influential, dangerously intelligent. Spiritual evil began its history with humanity there. And while this was happening on Earth, something very different was happening in the depths of the cosmos. The Watchers, chained in utter darkness, were slowly awakening within their spiritual prison. For angels, time doesn't have the same meaning as it does for humans. A year can seem like an instant. A millennium can seem like a breath. But in that abyss, time seemed painfully slow. Simyeza opened his eyes in the darkness. Azazel lay silently beneath the burning rocks. The other watchers remained trapped, immobilized, reflecting on each choice they had made. Some were shouting, others remained in absolute silence. Others cursed their own weakness. But there was a terrible truth that none of them could ignore. They would never see heaven again, until Judgment Day. For an angel, being separated from divine light is the spiritual equivalent of death. But they were alive, condemned, conscious, trapped in darkness. And there they would remain, for ages. The Watcher's emotional state was complex. Not everyone reacted the same way. Some bitterly regretted his decision. Others renounced the love they felt for the daughters of men. Some wanted to return. Others rebelled against God. Azazel, for example, remained in a profoundly proud silence. He refused to show remorse, even though he was trapped in the desert of darkness. Simyeza, on the other hand, felt a weight that was crushing him. He had led the pact. He had convinced the others. He had turned curiosity into rebellion. And her pain did not come from the punishment, but from consciousness. He knew everything he had caused. It was a burden that not even 1,000 years could erase. With the Watchers imprisoned and the Nephilim dead, Earth needed a fresh start. Noah's descendants spread across the earth, creating tribes, languages, and cultures. But something curious happened. The stories of the Watchers and the giants continued to live on. In human traditions, each civilization, even those separated by continents, brought back similar memories. Gods that came from the sky, giants who walked among men, luminous beings who taught knowledge, cataclysms that destroyed civilizations. Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, India, pre-Columbian America, all held echoes of the same event, as if the whole world had witnessed fragments of the same tragedy. And that intrigued ancient scholars. How could people separated by oceans have such similar memories? Simple. Because they had all survived the echo of the same event. The Watchers' rebellion. Behind all this scenario of destruction, pain, and new beginnings, lies a hidden revelation. A revelation that appears at the end of the Book of Enoch, but which many ignore or are afraid to face. A revelation that doesn't talk about the past, but about the future. And this revelation says something that few would dare to believe. They can return, but as and we? And in what form? And what would this mean for modern humanity? These answers, they belong to the last block. The most tense, the most revealing, the most disturbing thing. As generations passed, post-Diluvian humanity continued to advance. New cities emerged, new empires flourished, new rulers took power. But even amidst this progress, a silent fear lurked in the unconscious of ancient civilizations. The fear that it would happen again. The fear that spiritual beings would once again break through the barrier between heaven and earth. The fear that giants would once again walk among men. The fear that forbidden knowledge would return. And it wasn't an irrational fear. Because even after the flood, echoes of the rebellion still occurred at specific moments in history. Ancient peoples reported mysterious appearances of luminous beings. Leaders were influenced by unseen voices. Entire cultures adopted strange rituals that dangerously resembled the teachings of the Watchers. In some regions, priests claimed to hear voices of the winds, supposedly ancestral spirits that taught techniques of metallurgy, or the preparation of poisons techniques, very similar to those taught by Azazel. In other regions, tribal groups believed that ancient giants still lived asleep inside mountains, as if waiting for the right moment to return. And then, there were the legends about fallen angels visiting humans in dreams. Not to seduce or create hybrids, but to manipulate, inspire pride, and encourage disobedience. These stories may seem like myths, but when placed side by side with the account of Enoch, something begins to become clear. The Watcher's impact still lingered in the world, even imprisoned, even destroyed, even far away. His rebellion had left deep scars on the human psyche. What's fascinating is that virtually all ancient peoples recorded some level of this memory. Egypt, the gods, who descend from heaven to teach wisdom. Greece, the Titans, gigantic beings who caused chaos, and were imprisoned in Tartarus. Sumeria, the Apkallu hybrid demigods, sent by deities. America's the Starmen who descended to teach agriculture and astronomy. India, the Devas, who clashed with the Asuras, powerful hybrid beings. It's as if every part of the earth has heard the distant echo of the same story. A time when the boundary between heaven and man was violated, and the world almost ended. After the Watcher's rebellion, The relationship between heaven and earth changed radically. God has become more silent. Open intervention has decreased. Miracles have become rare. And that wasn't punishment. It was protection. Because when the sky gets too close to humanity, something breaks. The Watchers broke the natural order of the universe. And the price was so high, so catastrophic, so destructive, that God has established new spiritual limits, new boundaries, new seals. These seals prevented spiritual beings from freely crossing into the physical world. But here's the most important point of this section. These stamps are not permanent. They have a deadline, they have a purpose, and they have a prophecy associated with them. What happened in the past has not been erased. It was just contained, waiting for a new era. In one of the final passages of the Book of Enoch, there is a phrase that few notice, but which changes everything. The prison spaces will be opened on the last great day. This sentence means that the abyss where the Watchers are trapped will not be sealed forever. The spirits of the Nephilim will be permitted to act more intensely, and humanity will face a period similar to the days of Noah. And this is not merely symbolic, it's literal. In the end times, according to this prophecy, the Watchers may once again exert influence over the world, perhaps not by taking physical form, but influencing minds, corrupting leaders, encouraging destructive technologies, manipulating humanity as they have done before. Time passed. Civilizations arose. Empires have fallen. Kingdoms have risen and fallen like dust carried by the wind. But behind every chapter of human history, there was an invisible thread connecting the present to the most ancient past marked by the sin of the Watchers. And this thread was pulled again when ancient scholars began to notice something frightening. Human behaviors, in certain eras, replicated exactly the same patterns as the pre-flood generation. Rampant corruption, senseless violence, obstinacy against everything that is sacred, obsessive search for forbidden knowledge, dangerous mixes between science and power, worship of technology, pride, arrogance, disobedience. It was as if the world were, slowly but inevitably, going back to the days of Noah. And that was no coincidence, because an ancient prophecy hidden, ignored, and forgotten said that before the end, the Watchers would have influence again, not necessarily going down like they did in the past, not assuming a physical form, not taking wives, but influencing, guiding, blowing ideas, manipulating, inspiring pride and rebellion. They wouldn't need to climb out of the abyss to act. All humanity needs to do is open doors. The modern world prides itself on its technology. Telescopes reach distant planets. Scientists manipulate genetic codes. Machines think. Artificial intelligences learn and evolve. Experiments bring to life creatures in the laboratory that have never existed in nature. Humanity is accessing knowledge that, for millennia, has been beyond human reach. And each breakthrough seems to ignite a flame in the invisible flame that draws the attention of those beyond the veil. The question that echoes is simple and frightening. Are we unknowingly opening the same door that the Watchers opened? Perhaps yes. Because today, more than ever, humanity is trying to assume roles that previously belonged only to God, create artificial life, to alter the fundamental structure of nature, manipulating spiritual boundaries with occult practices that have regained strength. And while the world turns away from spiritual values, something is growing in the sky, an ancient murmur, like the awakening of voices that were asleep. At the end of the Book of Enoch, there is a disturbing vision. On the final great day, the prison gates will be opened. This doesn't just mean that the Watchers will be physically released. The original text suggests something more symbolic and more dangerous. It means that their influence will be unleashed. Not bodies, but ideas. No physical presence, but inspirations. Not giants, but spirits and concepts that led the world to chaos in the past. And if we look closely at the present, we see unsettling parallels. Peoples adopting ancient beliefs linked to celestial beings descending from the sky. Obsession with extraterrestrial beings. Increased use of astrology and occult practices. More devastating wars. Increasing violence. Science pushing dangerous ethical boundaries. And the revival of the cult of forbidden knowledge. The world seems to be repeating the pattern. And when patterns repeat themselves, prophecies are awakened. When the world hears the phrase "the Watchers will return," many imagine giant beings descending from the sky, taking wives, and creating hybrids. But that's not what the ancient text actually suggests. The return will be more subtle, more psychological, more spiritual, more cunning. They will influence global leaders, They will inspire technologies that cause destruction. They will manipulate ideologies. They will create movements that directly challenge divine order. They will make man feel like God, just like they did before. But this time, they don't need to show up. They don't need to be seen. They don't need to be noticed. All that's needed is for your ideas to find fertile ground, and the groundwork is already being prepared. Some scholars say there are clear signs that the world is entering an era similar to the days of Noah, and they point to specific signs: increased corruption on a global scale, violence at unprecedented levels, normalization of moral perversion, an insatiable quest for forbidden knowledge, genetic manipulation, and the creation of new beings, modern idolatry, not of gods, but of technology, money, and power, decline of spirituality, exaltation of one's own humanity, as if it were divine, signs in the sky, unexplained phenomena. All of this creates an atmosphere conducive to the return of the Watcher's influence. And this return ... is not something physical. It's mental. It's cultural. It's spiritual. They're trying to come back, not with steps, but with ideas. Because if the world is truly approaching an era similar to the days of Noah, then the abysses are shifting. The shadows are restless. The seals are being tested. And the spirit of ancient rebellion is blowing again among men. Humanity is once again approaching a dangerous threshold. And the boundary between the visible and invisible worlds is beginning to blur. The Watchers do not return with trumpets. They do not return in glory. They don't return with shine. They return with influence, with ideas, with seduction, with pride, with forbidden knowledge. The same knowledge that nearly destroyed the ancient world. The story of the Watchers is not just a narrative lost in the desert of time. She is a mirror, a warning, a profound echo that transcends eras and touches humanity once again. The Watchers fell because they believed they knew more than God. They fell because they allowed themselves to be seduced by beauty, desire, curiosity, and pride. They fell because they crossed a line that should never have been crossed, and they paid the eternal price. But the true impact of the story lies not only in what they did. It is not that as we're doing it today. Because whenever humanity plays with too much power, whenever you seek knowledge without wisdom, whenever you try to replace the divine, whenever he becomes filled with arrogance, she repeats the pattern of the Watchers. We live in a time when science wants to push the boundaries of creation. We live in an era where violence is intensifying, where spirituality dissolves, where the line between right and wrong disappears. We are perhaps living in an era that dangerously resembles the Noah's days. And the prophecy you discovered today, the one that almost no one knows about, warns us. The influence of the Watchers may return, not in good physical shape, not like giants, not like beings of light descending from the sky, but as ideas, as influences, as cultural movements that spread silently. And it is up to us to recognize these signs. It is up to us to realize when pride tries to distance us from the truth. It is up to us to keep our awareness awake. The story of the Watchers doesn't end with their arrest. She ends with a question that still resonates today. What will you do with the knowledge you have gained? Because by watching this video to the end, you have proven that you seek wisdom, seeking depth, seeking to understand the invisible behind the visible, and that puts you ahead of most people. The moral of this story is clear. Even beings of light can fall when they ignore boundaries. And even human beings can rise up when they choose wisdom. The Watchers fell because of their arrogance. But we can rise through humility. They destroyed it because of pride. But we can build through awareness. Their story is a warning. But it's also an opportunity. The opportunity to learn from the past, before it happens again. And if you wish to continue this journey, if you want to understand more hidden, forbidden, lost stories, so now you know what to do, watch the next video. Because the deepest truths of the spiritual world, they are still waiting to be revealed.